You put a cave in your tank thinking it was just decoration. And then something weird happened. Your fish changed. Not a little. Fundamentally. Here's the thing most people don't realize. A cave in an aquarium is not a piece of furniture. It is a psychological switch. And depending on how you use it, it either unlocks the best version of your fish or quietly breaks them. There's actually one specific way caves get used in the wild that almost nobody replicates at home. And, when you hear it, you'll probably want to rearrange your entire tank. We'll get to that. But first, let's talk about what caves are actually doing to your fish right now. Most aquarium advice treats caves as a comfort item, something to put in the corner so your shy fish has a spot to hide. And sure, that's part of it. But that framing misses almost everything interesting. Because in nature, a flooded cave system is not a hiding spot. It is a power structure. It decides who breeds, who eats, who survives the night, and who gets pushed to the worst real estate in the whole lake. When you drop even one cave into your home tank, you are building a miniature version of that system, whether you meant to or not. So let's go through what's actually happening, starting with the one that surprises people the most. Caves in the wild are not about comfort. They are weapons. In Lake Malawi, researchers studying Pseudotropheus Tropheops, a rock-dwelling cichlid, found something that genuinely flipped the script on how we think about fish dominance. The number of caves within a male's territory was a better predictor of courtship activity than was male size or territory area. Read that again. Not how big the fish was, not how large his territory was, how many caves he controlled. Males of this species defend territories on either flat rock slabs lacking crevices and caves, or structurally complex boulder fields containing cave shelters. The males who landed the complex cave-rich zones, they bred more. The ones stuck on flat rock, they lost, not because they were weaker, but because they had worse architecture. Now translate that to your tank, that single ceramic cave you placed in the center of your aquarium. You just handed one fish the keys to the whole social system. Both territory size and occupancy depend on the size of male residents, and males larger than a threshold size exclusively held the largest and most structurally complex territories. So, if you have a dominant fish, he will claim that cave, and from that point forward, the cave becomes his headquarters, not just for resting, but for controlling feeding zones, chasing rivals, and signaling to females. You didn't add a decoration. You installed a throne. And here's where it gets interesting for the fish that don't get the throne. Smaller males lacking caves tend to move into adjacent boulder fields in the presence of predators, particularly at night. There are no predators in your living room, obviously, but your tank fish don't know that. A fast shadow moving past the glass, a dominant tank mate charging across the open water, a sudden light change. These all register the same way in a fish's nervous system. And without a cave to retreat to, the subordinate fish in your tank are essentially living in a permanent state of low-grade threat. They can't settle. They can't establish a home base. They just keep moving, keep getting pushed, keep existing in what researchers call a state of chronic displacement. In contrast, males defending caves were more likely to remain on their territories when nocturnal predators were present. That stability, being able to hold your ground because you have a defensible structure nearby, is the difference between a fish that behaves normally and one that is permanently in survival mode. So, if you have a community tank and you only gave one fish a cave, you might have accidentally created a permanent loser class for everyone else. The fix is not complicated, but it requires thinking about caves as territory markers, not decorations. Give the lower-ranking fish their own dedicated spaces, smaller, tucked away, physically separated from the dominant cave, and you will see their behavior shift within days. More foraging, more exploration, less hiding in corners. The fish that had no anchor finally has one. Now, before we get to the part that most people completely overlook, and this one genuinely changes how you think about your whole setup, let's talk about light. Researchers set out to assess tank color preferences of coho salmon and quantify how background color affects aggression. What they found was consistent with a broader pattern across species. Darker environments reduce stress behaviors. Fish exposed to brighter backgrounds showed 3 to 8 times greater mean cortisol concentrations than fish exposed to a black background. Cortisol is the stress hormone, 3 to 8 times more of it, just from the color of the environment. And fish exposed to constant light showed higher locomotor activity and increased cortisol levels throughout the experiment, with evidence of chronic stress fatigue. A cave solves this without you doing anything extra. When your fish ducks inside a cave, the light level drops. Visual noise from outside, movement, reflections, the silhouette of someone walking past disappears. The nervous system gets a moment to breathe. It is not just physical shelter, it is sensory relief. A dark background was beneficial, resulting in enhanced growth and weight gain in controlled studies, and the same principle applies here. Darkness is not just absence of light, it is active recovery for a fish's stress response. Think of the cave as a reset button your fish can press whenever the outside world gets to be too much. And this brings us to the thing almost nobody talks about. The part that took me the longest to really understand, and the part that I think is the most important insight in this whole video. Caves don't just shelter fish, they shape personality. In controlled studies, including appropriate substrate providing natural shelter reduced stress and allowed the implementation of specific behavioral testing, including boldness tests. What researchers found, consistently, is that fish with access to a reliable retreat are bolder outside of it. Bold fish tend to spend more time exploring the top of the tank than their shy counterparts. And the key word there is access. The cave does not make the fish bold by being used constantly. It makes the fish bold by existing. The fish knows it's there. That knowledge, that there is a safe place within reach, acts like a psychological anchor that lets them take risks in the open water they would never take otherwise. Think about it from the fish's perspective. If every inch of your tank is equally dangerous, you stay still. You minimize movement. You become a ghost. But if there is one spot that is unambiguously yours, unambiguously safe, you can use that as a launch pad. You explore further. You come out at feeding time instead of waiting until the coast is clear. You actually live in your tank instead of surviving it. A barren tank causes chronic stress, while a complex, enriched aquascape promotes natural behaviors and mental well-being. A cave is the single highest impact piece of complexity you can add, because it does not just enrich the environment, it changes what the fish believes about the environment. This is especially true for species that evolved in cave-rich habitats. Loaches, L-number Plecos, Apistogramma, shell-dwelling cichlids. These fish did not evolve in open water. Their entire behavioral repertoire is built around the assumption that a hiding place is always nearby. When you remove that, you are not just leaving out a decoration. You are forcing the fish into a psychological state it was never designed to handle. Permanent exposure, permanent vigilance. And over time, that shows up as hiding during the day, refusing food, barely moving, never really thriving. People assume the fish is just shy. Often, the fish is just exhausted. Now here is the part about caves that completely reframes how you should design your tank layout. And this is what I meant earlier when I said there is one thing almost nobody replicates at home. Female preferences were independent of male body size, coloration, and territory size, but were strongly dependent on territory quality and co-varied with male courtship activity. And courtship activity of individual males was contingent on the quality of their assigned territory. So the female is not choosing the biggest fish. She is choosing the fish with the best real estate. And the male is not performing because he is confident. He is performing because the territory is giving him something to perform with. The architecture is doing the work. Within population preferences of females were strongly dependent on territory quality, and co-varied with male courtship activity. And courtship activity was contingent on the quality of the assigned territory. Meaning courtship may not only indicate intrinsic male quality. In plain terms, if you want to see your fish display their full behavior, their full color, their full personality, give them a territory worth displaying in. A cave-rich zone in your tank is not just a nice feature. It is the trigger that unlocks behaviors you have probably never seen from your fish before. And here is the design implication that most people miss entirely. If you cluster all the caves in one area, you build an alpha hotspot. One fish will claim it, and that fish will become the most active, most colorful, most behaviorally complex animal in the tank, because the territory is doing that to them. If you want that effect, great. But if you want a more balanced tank, where multiple fish get to express full behavior, you need to distribute caves across different zones, at different heights, with different entrance sizes, so that multiple fish can each hold something worth holding. Which brings up the geometry question, and this one is more important than people think. A cave that is too big for the fish it is meant to protect is not a cave. It is a trap. If a dominant fish can follow a smaller fish inside, the smaller fish has no refuge. It just has a corner it cannot escape from. Species-specific sizing matters enormously. Narrow tubes for fish that evolved in tight crevices. Wider chambers for fish that need to turn around inside. The entrance size is the whole point, because it is the entrance size that physically excludes the aggressor. A properly sized cave is one where your target fish fits comfortably and your dominant fish does not fit at all. That one design choice, getting the geometry right, can reduce aggression in a community tank more than almost anything else you do. So here is where we land. You started this video thinking a cave was a decoration. What it actually is, a social architecture tool. It decides who breeds and who does not. It controls stress hormone levels. It shapes whether your fish is bold or permanently hiding. It determines whether your subordinate fish ever get a moment of peace. And the geometry of it, the size, the placement, the entrance width, controls all of that more precisely than almost any other variable in your tank. The fish you thought was just shy might just be homeless. The fish you thought was aggressive might just be protecting the only resource that matters. And the tank you thought was big enough might just be a city with no neighborhoods. If any of this made you look at your setup differently, drop a comment below. I want to know what caves you're running and what your fish are actually doing with them. And if you want to go deeper on fish psychology and tank design, there is a video right next to this one that picks up exactly where we left off. Watch that next. I'll see you there.